McDonald's announced a new partnership with Krispy Kreme to offer donuts at the fast food chain because if you love McDonald's and you love Krispy Kreme, you don't have the energy to make two stops.
Yes. That's a professional level, high level, $1 million writing right there. That's the comedy shop in the United States. That's what the Democrats have done to comedy. It's very sad, isn't it? Very sad. Tragic even. But it is true that McDonald's is going to be selling Krispy Kreme donuts, and as maybe a little bit absurd, every now and then I'll get the number 2 meal, the quarter pounder with cheese and the fries and a Coke. But I can't imagine at that moment I'm going to want a Krispy Kreme donut in addition. I guess you can get one or the other. You don't have to get both. Well, happy Wednesday to you. Happy Wednesday indeed. Hump Day in the Bill and Hillary Clinton household, wherever they may be, whichever of their mansions, their multi-million-dollar mansions. That means Hillary has to be out of the house, because Bill, it's Hump Day. And Hillary wakes up face down in a pool of her own dried vomit on the kitchen floor with an empty cardboard 1-gallon box of cheap New Zealand Chardonnay and the Secret Service standing over her, knuckles on hips, tisking what might have been. Hillary thinks it still might be, too, which is why Joe Biden's security detail is uncomfortable every day. One of the reasons. One of the big reasons. So we got that, and that also means that it's Mailbag Day. Mailbag Day here on the Chris Plant Show, and I have in my hand right here, I have questions, the mailbag questions. Very, very good. Speaking of the mailbag, I got from Barrington, Illinois yesterday, a wonderful, wonderful gift in the mail from a wonderful American and a listener who sent me a copy of a book that my grandfather wrote. My grandfather wrote a couple of books. He was a radio man, something of a radio pioneer, in fact, and he wrote a couple of books in the 1930s. And a wonderful listener, Barrington, Illinois, sent along in excellent condition a book that my grandfather had written, and with a nice note. And the book is autographed by my grandfather, as you might imagine, since he was the author of the book back then. But very nice gift. Speaking of mailbag, because it's kind of a mailbag story a little bit. But there is a lot to talk about because of all the crazy news going on in the world. And we have updates for you on the bridge incident in Baltimore. The bridge did collapse after a giant freight ship crashed into it. And there are a lot of questions that it seems our government officials are not overly enthusiastic about addressing right now. They came out very early, our government officials did, in whom we have the utmost confidence, no doubt, over all matters. Whatever they tell us, we just believe it. We take it at face value because the state is a fount of truth. We, of course, know that's not true, don't we? But yesterday morning, they immediately rushed to the microphones, and every Democrat politician in Maryland went down there because they found out there were cameras there. And Pete Buttigieg finally got there, too, and he was a bit embarrassing, as usual. But we heard yesterday morning the sun was barely up, if it was up at all, before government officials, since the incident initially occurred at about 1:30 a.m., and we had government technically yesterday morning, and we had government officials down there lickety-split. We had government officials down there telling us there's nothing suspicious about anything here. Maybe they had spoken to the ship's crew or the captain or something, but there are peculiar elements to the story that must be investigated to satisfy at a bare minimum the curiosity of the public. Some of us are still curious. Others don't know what curiosity is, and most of them appear to be journalists. But I'm making quotation marks with my fingers, journalists. But there are a lot of interesting things. And speaking of journalists, Lara Logan, who was a longtime CBS News correspondent and 60 Minutes correspondent, she did an interview. First, she posted some tweets on her X file, and she raised questions about whether there was a hack perhaps a foreign hack that cut off the electricity of the ship. Did it take control of the ship? Can anything like that be done? Lara Logan, award-winning journalist and, a serious journalist, but has had a little bit of a bumpy road for the last few years. Reputationally and otherwise, she's been attacked by her former colleagues and so on. But in any case, Lara Logan, originally South African, is she, a longtime war correspondent. And she raised questions yesterday that are not being addressed. And in fact, she pointed to, and correctly, our FBI Director Christopher Wray in congressional testimony a matter of weeks ago sounded the alarm about hacks, how we're in danger of having and he actually talked about infrastructure hacks, right? And how that's something they're looking at. And then weeks later, we have this incident in Baltimore. I'll let Lara Logan speak for herself. She did an interview with Steve Bannon, and she posted on Twitter, which is where I first had my attention drawn to what Lara Logan was saying. And she cites intelligence officials, who are anonymous, of course, but that's the case in every newspaper every day. So that's not really a huge issue. But I want to get to that because that is it's interesting, very interesting. Given the couple of pieces that go along with what award-winning journalist Lara Logan was saying yesterday, it dovetails with what the FBI director warned us about. And Joe Biden came out yesterday and said there's nothing to see here, nothing suspicious at all, which is, of course, another suspicious point because you can't believe him, can you? No, you can't. So we've got that going for it. And we have Ronna Romney McDaniel, who, as you know, was the chairwoman, the chair of the Republican National Committee for years, didn't have a very successful run there, according to every account. But she left the RNC when President Trump became the presumptive nominee after securing the requisite number of, during the primary process, of electoral votes across the country. And she left because she was not in good standing with the Republican Party and certainly not with the Trump people. She was almost immediately hired by NBC Fake News. Then there was an insurrection over there by the fake journalists like Rachel Maddow and that socialist Lawrence O'Donnell and all of these mental cases over at a lot of them are racists and some of them aren't, but they're all leftists and they're all lunatics. And they launched a rebellion against management at NBC, and NBC relented yesterday, the senior management. And they said, okay, we'll get rid of her. And now she's going to sue the heck out of them and get millions and millions of dollars for the reputational damage and intentional infliction of emotional distress and violation of contract, presumably. They'll pay out her contract and then millions more because they want to make this go away. They've got their $30 million a year Rachel Maddow, and she's their favorite guy, so they're going to do whatever she wants, apparently. Just crazy stuff going on with that. Also, George Walker Bush, was at an event, and he was on stage, and there was an audience, and people were doing asking questions. There was a Q&A, and George W. Bush laid out what Hamas is in a way so clear that Joe Biden should be forced to watch it like in Clockwork Orange with his eyelids pinned open, lashed into a chair, because George W. Bush knows what radical Islam is, and Joe Biden doesn't. In fact, none of the Democrats know what radical Islam is. There's something wrong with their brains. You got that whole, gender thing and the drugs thing and the economy thing and the open border thing and the war in Europe and war in the Middle East thing, and they got a lot of problems. But they don't know what radical Islam is either. They've forgotten. They erased all memory. Perhaps they never knew, but it's an amazing thing. And W. Bush summed it up succinctly, which is not something that he's known for, of course, but did very well. Joe Biden was at a fundraiser. All he's ever had is a fundraiser in North Carolina. And left-wingers got up and started yelling at him about being more pro-terrorist, being more pro-radical Islamic jihadi terrorist. These are words that you can't use in Joe Biden's intelligence community, you may be aware, because they put out a memo that you can't use words like radical Islam and terrorist and things like that because it might offend people that'll cut your children's heads off with rusty knives, and Democrats want to be on their good side because they're not very bright at all. So there are a lot of crazy stories out there today, and I've got a bunch of them for you, that's for sure. Really remarkable stuff, I'm telling you. And, also, Joe Biden is going to New York to hold a fundraiser, naturally, with rich billionaire people, and because they're the party of the little guy, but mostly they're the party of the billionaires. And he's going to Radio City Music Hall, which is a big theater, and they're inviting lots of people and selling very expensive tickets. You can get your photo taken. Now, but I've got it. It's better than just Joe Biden because Barack Hussein Obama will be there, and he can slow the rise of the oceans. He has godlike powers, and Bill Clinton is there, but he's just looking for dates. He's just looking for the women. But you can get your picture taken. The Washington Post says that you can pay $500,000 to go to this Radio City Music Hall fundraiser, and then you probably get your picture taken with Joe Biden and Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. Too bad Jimmy Carter can't be there because then they'd seal up the package there. The New York Post has the story, Dem donors can pay $100,000. Washington Post says that people there will be paying up to $500,000. But the New York Post says Dem donors can pay $100,000 for Annie Leibovitz photo with Biden, Obama, and Bill Clinton. And if you pay $500,000, it's a naked picture, which is a little bit weird, I think. But for the Democrats, maybe not so weird. So I want to share that. Oh, and there's celebrities there, too, in addition, because it's all a terrible television show. It's all show business. It's just cable television. This is how we elect our political leaders in the United States. It's like The Bachelor, but instead of the rose, you get the date. You get a date. Is that Bachelor where you get a rose and a date, Michael? You don't know. You're not paying attention. It's the rose and the date. But now in America, it's a cable show. You get the presidency. You get the White House and Air Force One, and you get to ruin the world because you're a leftist and you hate humanity and the United States of America. Amazing stuff. Cringe, Cringe Jean-Pierre. She foolishly did a radio interview yesterday, and it turned out pretty funny because the interviewer asked Cringe about Joe Biden's dementia, and didn't go very well. And Cringe ended up rudely hanging up right in the middle of a sentence, just like, screw this. Maybe she quit. Maybe she got a job at MSNBC because there's an opening. There's an opening over there at NBC, and maybe they'll hire her just like they hired Jen Psaki, who was Joe Biden's last White House spokesmodel. And she was hired by NBC Fake News and given a 1-hour show with zero journalistic background in her life. And they gave her $1 million job, a one-hour show on MSDNC that nobody watches, but that doesn't matter because they don't care about that. And she was still working at the White House as the press spokesmodel, so I wouldn't be entirely surprised since the NBC fired the woman. They just hired her last week. They did one interview, and I suspect that runner Romney McDaniel will end up with, I'm going to say, $5 million for doing one interview that aired on Face the Meat, on Meet the Press on Sunday. And I'll bet she's going to end up being paid out. Her full contract will be paid out. And then there are already lawyers involved, of course, as you might expect. They're going to sue for intentional infliction and for reputational damage that NBC has done to her. So that's that's going to be, it's going to end up being kind of a funny story for her. NBC will pay her off just to go away because that's what they do. Also, did you see that Joe Biden claimed that he used to take the train all the time across the Francis Scott Key Bridge, the one that collapsed after a big ship crashed into it. He claimed that he used to take the train across that bridge regularly when he was going to Delaware. You know, he's Mr. Amtrak. Hunter Biden was, what was he, the vice chairman of the board of Amtrak? Because he used to ride the train with his dad. It's a very corrupt country that we're living in, a very corrupt city, Washington, D.C., and the Biden family is a very corrupt family. If only the press weren't more corrupt than the Bidens, we'd be living in a very different country. But Joe Biden claims he used to take the train across the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore. There are no train tracks on the bridge. There were no train tracks on the bridge. And I've got an update on the 6 people that are now presumed dead, all of them from Latin America. Last people on the bridge. So I got a few things for you there. Lots of updates on the bridge. Lara Logan, Joe Biden, and we are at 888-630-9625. Hey, it's Chris Plant, excited to tell you about our July 2024 Listener Sea Cruise. We'll be sailing around the British Isles, visiting Scotland and Ireland. Please join us. Visit ChrisPlantCruise.com. Ah, yes. All right, I'm going to get to this Lara Logan interview after the next break. And you want to hear it. It may be a little, a little this, a little that, but you want to hear it. Questions ought to be raised, and our fake media won't raise them. Let's go to the telephones, Michael. Let's go to Matt, calling from St. Louis, Missouri. Matthew, you're on the Chris Plant Show. Oh, the big button isn't working. And let's go to Matt.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, there you are, Matt.
Hey, happy hump day in Tyrantopia. Hey, a few things on the Baltimore Bridge. First, I guess Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg has appointed the killer of Laken Riley to rebuild the bridge because he built America, as we learned in the State of the Union address. But then Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott, once it's done, he's going to claim credit for it being part of the Democrat Party, and then rename the bridge from the Francis Scott Key Bridge to the Brandon Scott Key Bridge. And then lastly, MSN 13 and the Golden Stream Media are now reporting that right before the ship hit the bridge, Trump was seen on the bow with his arms spread saying, "I'm the king of the world." So as usual, it's Trump's fault.
Well, I'm surprised that they haven't brought global warming into it yet, but I assume that they will before the day is done, because the tides are probably moving more quickly than ever before, and that's because of climate change. And listen, Matt, I think you're getting a bit cynical. Do you think you're getting a bit cynical?
Oh, not at all. We got the crack staff on the job at the administration. The third term of the Obama bin Biden administration, with Kim Jong-Pierre as the spokesperson speaking North Korean.
Speaking North Korean. Yeah, I think they may rename the bridge for Joe Biden as well. Because, he used to take Amtrak trains across that bridge with no train tracks. All right, big story, big event, historic event, Baltimore Harbor. Baltimore Harbor is now shut down, one of the largest and busiest seaports in the United States of America. Tens of billions of dollars in goods coming in to Baltimore with ships large and small. But yesterday's events, big events, there was a radio call from, and it's the Maryland Department of Public Safety or something, and they make it clear they got a radio call that the ship was out of control, and it's a gigantic, massively heavy ship. And the warning came out, thankfully, I guess, from the bridge of the ship. And on the bridge, it's remarkable, really. The law enforcement authorities were alerted, and they shut down traffic going onto the bridge, and presumably saved a whole bunch of lives by doing that. The radio call sounded like this.
You stop traffic. Just make sure no one's on the bridge right now. I'm not sure where. There's a crew up there. We might want to notify whoever the foreman is, see if we can get them off the bridge temporarily.
C-13 dispatch. The whole bridge just fell down. Start stars, whoever, everybody. The whole bridge just collapsed.
There is a crew on the bridge stopping traffic. They got this. The ship is out of control. It's veering toward the bridge. Why the ship couldn't steer it away? We're told that the bridge, the captain, dropped anchor, which is interesting, presumably trying to stop the ship. Why couldn't they stop the engines, reverse the engines? Why couldn't they steer the ship away from the bridge and into the open harbor? If they had lost control of the ship, what are the emergency measures that you would take under those circumstances while on the bridge? Did they have the ability, did they lose engine power when they lost electricity? We can see that they lost lights on the ship shortly before crashing into the bridge. So did they lose electricity? Why did they lose electricity? How did they lose electricity? When they do lose electricity, do they lose the ability to control the steering of the ship, to control the rudders, the engine thrust? Is there any emergency measure that could have been taken to vector the ship away from the bridge and into open waters? It's a bridge that big ships like this can go under, but they apparently lost the ability to control the trajectory of the ship. There's a great deal of inertia once a ship that size and that kind of weight, tens of, thousands of tons of ship. It's not easy to bring to a screeching halt in the water. I appreciate that. I've actually driven the USS Enterprise, the aircraft carrier, and I'm going like this, like I'm Popeye driving the big wooden wheel. But the Enterprise does have a big wooden wheel on the, like a Popeye. And I did drive the USS Enterprise and turned it, got to turn, sailing along and turned the Enterprise. And a friend who was a naval commander then said, "Wait, you just turned. That's going to cost us $250,000. So it cost $250,000 to turn the Enterprise." I think he was kidding. I'm pretty sure he was kidding. But in any case, the warning went out, and great brave men suffering from toxic masculinity stopped the traffic going onto the bridge, and that is a great thing. Now, you also heard the radio call that there was a crew, they said, on the bridge at the time, and now we're talking about the 6 construction workers who the effort turned to a recovery effort. They were first the subject of a rescue effort, but after X number of hours and cold water and currents and so on, there is no hope at this point that any of the 6 will be found alive. So now they're looking to recover their bodies in a recovery effort, and it's obviously sad. The 6 men were working for Bronner Builders. They were filling potholes on the center span of the bridge at the time at 1:30 in the morning. So they're not doing it at rush hour. Now, the men who are presumed dead are from El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Mexico. And they lived in the towns of Dundalk and Highlandtown in Maryland, and they are now presumed dead. The Guatemalan Ministry of Foreign Affairs, basically their embassy, confirmed that 2 of the men were from Guatemala, and there was a report that I heard, and I don't know if it's true or not, it doesn't make all the sense in the world, that none of them were English-speaking, and perhaps they just speak Spanish to each other, but one of the missing men from El Salvador, identified as Miguel Luna, by an organization called CASA. CASA, they said he's a husband, the father of 3, and he's lived in Maryland for 19 years. And obviously, father of 3, husband, working 1:30 in the morning, filling potholes on the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore. He's working hard. He's, this is tough stuff. The Honduras Deputy Foreign Affairs Minister Antonio Garcia told the Associated Press the Honduran citizen, Maynard Yasser Suano Sandoval, was missing also, and has family. And the Mexican embassy in Washington said that there were Mexicans among the 6 as well. So this is, 6 men died, and they were working in the middle of the night filling potholes on the bridge. They're all from Latin American countries, and it is it's a tragedy. It's a tragic story, obviously. Now let's get to everything that's going on here. Let's see. We're going to number 3, Joe Biden. Joe Biden with another delusion, another fantastical story. There are no train tracks. There were no train tracks, past tense, on the Key Bridge there, the Francis Scott Key Bridge. We have a Francis Scott Key Bridge in Washington, D.C. also, I mentioned yesterday. Joe Biden has, in his imagination, he used to take the Amtrak train across this bridge all the time going to Delaware.
At about 1:30, a container ship struck the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which I've been over many, many times commuting from the state of Delaware, either on train or by car.
Either by train or by car. Well, maybe by car, in motorcades and things like that, but probably not by train. That would be frowned upon since there were no train tracks on the Francis Scott Key Bridge, but he doesn't remember real good. Know what I'm talking about? Not at all. And yesterday, Joe Biden came out and said, well, one thing's for sure, we're going to throw a bunch of money at it because that's something that Joe and the Democrats do very well.
It's my intention that federal government will pay for the entire cost of reconstructing that bridge, and I expect the Congress to support my effort.
He expects the
Everything so
Congress.
far indicates that this was a terrible accident. At this time, we have no other indication, no other reason to believe there's any intentional act here.
At this point, terrible accident, and it's the line that they've been putting out since yesterday morning, again at dawn, if not before, that as an accident there is nothing to see here. What that is based on are always trustworthy government officials have not explained, but that's what they're telling us. And when Joe Biden tells us that it's just a terrible accident and there's nothing to see here, that makes it less likely that it's just a terrible accident and there's nothing to see here because he's Joe Biden. Just saying. So that is Joe Biden, and I'm making all kinds of crazy claims. You may remember Christopher Wray, the director of the entire FBI, was on Capitol Hill recently talking about the threat of cyber attacks on the United States from, China, communist China. They have campuses of skyscrapers filled with people who do nothing but hack around the world. Go online, fiber optic cables under the Pacific and across here and there, like Joe Biden's train across the Indian Ocean. But remember, has he built that train yet? The Chinese hack everybody. The Iranians hack everybody. They have big hacking operations. It is a form of warfare against the United States of America. And the FBI director, Christopher Wray, who I don't trust and has a permanent sneer on his face, and he's not on Team America, he warned us on Capitol Hill while under oath about the threat of cyber attacks from foreign enemies, adversaries, rivals. Christopher Wray.
There has been far too little public focus on the fact that PRC hackers are targeting our critical infrastructure. China's hackers are positioning on American infrastructure in preparation to wreak havoc and cause real-world harm to American citizens and communities if and when China decides the time has come to strike.
And, they may just be dabbling and causing chaos and mayhem. And this big $1 billion ship with all of that cargo on it is leaving Baltimore Harbor. And the lights are going on and off. They lose control of the ship. These are peculiar incidents all by themselves. And why was the crew unable to vector the ship away from the bridge, just in any direction? Why were they unable to reverse thrust the engines or kill the engines and again turn the wheel when the electricity goes out? It's probably all, fly-by-wire, electronically controlled. It's not like on a ship that size. You've got, it's not a 40-foot boat where the wheel is attached to wires that turn the rudders. It's computer controlled, no doubt. But there are still questions that I have as to why the ship was, and the people in control of the ship, why they were completely unable to just neutralize the ship, to turn it that way. Okay, the electricity's out, and it's computer controlled, so you can't use the reverse thrusters. You can't do this and that. But really, and it just goes right into one of the pilings of the bridge, and it goes down like that. That's kind of peculiar. Now let me go to Lara Logan. That's number 4. Starts at number 4. She is an award-winning journalist. She was a CBS News reporter for a long time, largely in war zones, Afghanistan, Iraq, and she was violently sexually assaulted by a mob of Muslim men in Tahrir Square in Cairo, Egypt, during one of the upheavals there. Now, she is also someone who is no longer with CBS News. She has been widely disparaged by her erstwhile colleagues at CBS News and others in the news business. Now, she's an award-winning journalist, and I was looking at her awards. I thought a couple of things were worthy of note in her bio. She was, in 2004, given the American Women in Radio and Television Gracie Award. We have friends here like, Heather, who... Yeah, Smith now, who received the Gracie Award last year. It's a good award for women. She also received from the Overseas Press Club the David Kaplan Award. David Kaplan was a news producer at ABC News, who I knew for years before he was shot and killed by a sniper in Bosnia. And she received from the Radio Television Correspondents Association, received the David Bloom Award. David Bloom was killed in Iraq in an incident there during the war. She also received the Daniel Pearl Award. I see a theme emerging here. Daniel Pearl was a news reporter that was kidnapped by troglodytes and murdered and decapitated on video in Pakistan, because that's what terrorists do. I'm like, well, wait a minute. And then the National Press Club, the John Aubuchon Press Freedom Award. She's won plenty of awards as a journalist, and I find it kind of odd that David Kaplan, David Bloom, and Danny Pearl are awards named after people that were killed in doing their jobs in hellholes around the world, or beep holes. Now, the fact is, a lot of people will say bad things about Lara Logan. She has been there, done that as a reporter. There's no doubt about that. She was given plenty of awards. And then she started, talking about conspiracy things here and there, and she's found herself in hot water over a number of different things that she has said. And there are those who will simply describe her, including friends of mine, who describe her as a certifiable loon, I think is the way one great friend described her. And I can't say that I know her. We used to go to the same swimming pool in the summertime, though, in our neighborhood. And she doesn't live in the neighborhood anymore. But never mind that. So she posted on Twitter yesterday something that got my attention and got the attention of a lot of people, actually. And it started something, and then Steve Bannon invited Lara Logan on to do an interview. With him, and I'm going to share some of that with you now, because some pretty interesting stuff. But when she posted on Twitter yesterday, her initial post, it got a lot of attention. It certainly did get a lot of attention. She wrote, multiple intel sources, that's short for intelligence sources, : they love their colons. Baltimore bridge collapse was, quote, absolutely brilliant strategic attack, end quote, on U.S. critical infrastructure, most likely cyber, and our intel agencies know it. In information warfare terms, they just divided the U.S. along the Mason-Dixon line, exactly like in the Civil War. Now, that is interesting, but... And she went on from there. Now I've got audio that I'm going to share with you on this, because these are questions that need to be raised, and whether she is 100% reliable and dependable, she's raising questions, and she cites what she says are intelligence sources, right? And she's plugged in. I know that she's plugged in with intelligence sources. I spent a decade myself doing a bit of that, and I want to share it with you, and I'll give you my opinion, and then you can draw your own opinions. Man, oh man! All right, I'm going to share with you the Lara Logan interview from yesterday, and what she was talking about. She's being accused of being a conspiracy theorist. She says she's speaking to intelligence officials, and I'll let her speak for herself. And then I'll tell you what I think, and then you get to think what you think. That's remember how America used to work. Let's go to the phones. Let's go to Angie, calling from North Carolina. Angie, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Hi, Chris. It's actually South Carolina. North Myrtle Beach, but South Carolina.
My apologies. South Carolina.
It's okay. It's okay. And the last time I called, you told me you said, Angie, you're right. And I saved that recording on my phone, and I play it to my kids all the time, just so you know.
That is great. Well, you must have been very right.
Yes. So what I was calling about is I was all for it was an accident, and it probably still was. But why does Joe Biden come out and instantly say, the federal government, we're going to pay 100%, we're going to send you all the money? What about the shipping company? What about the ship? Do they have no responsibility for what happened? Why is it always us?
Joe Biden thinks he sounds generous when he promises billions and even trillions of dollars for things like infrastructure, and then we never see any infrastructure changes. But Democrats believe that the larger the dollar figure you use in your speech, the more generous you are, the more giving you are. It's other people's money, of course, like commies and socialists everywhere. But they just like big dollar figures. It makes them feel good.